Shalom Chavarim, hello friends, and welcome back to another video. I'm Rabbi Stern, and today we're going to be watching a history of the Bible, I guess. It's kind of a different take on history of the world, I guess, which I reviewed and a lot of people watched. And that was one of my early videos, so hopefully this one will have more content in it. Now, it's worth noting that this video, A History of the Bible, I guess, is told from a Christian perspective because of the YouTuber who made it, and they put a lot of work into it. I'm not at all insulting their work, but it'll be an opportunity for me to explain the differences in how Jews view the Tanakh, or the books of the Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings, from the way that Christians view those books. I'm not going to weigh in on the part of his video where he talks about Christian books. Christian dogma is not my thing. I'm a rabbi, so I don't have anything really to add to that, but I will be watching the part of the video that deals with our books and our prophets and trying to explain what they mean and hopefully enjoying the video. So let's get to it, but before that, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment to tell me what you might want me to review next. Now, let's get to it. As I mentioned in the intro, this is a Christian perspective that this YouTuber, Redeemed Zoomer, is coming from. And so this isn't a disputation like in the Middle Ages. We're just trying to enjoy the video, but I will also fill in information on what I think about the Torah and where I think we differ in our feelings about what the text means. Okay, let's get to it.
Hi, you live on Earth. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it, but why is it there? The Bible has a story to tell. In the beginning, before there was anything, before there was anywhere, before there was any when, there was God, who is everywhere and every when. He is isness itself, and he has everything, so he doesn't even need to create the world. But God still created the world. Wait, no, it didn't look like that at first. It was more...
It did start more formless. We call this creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing. And that's what we believe was before God created the universe.
And void and very dark. But God let there be light, so now there's light. And this light stuff is pretty good, so God separated it from the darkness. And we should give these things names.
Sure.
Good news, the water below is now separated from the water above. Even more good news, now there's dry land.
Some people believe this is all metaphorical,
life,
that it didn't happen exactly day by day.
But the plants might have cleaned up the air, so now you can see the sun, moon, and stars. That's going to be very useful. There's animals in the water. There's animals in the air. There's animals on the land. And now it's time for God's coolest creation so far. God made a human person, called Adam, and gave him an...
Yes, created Adam from the Hebrew Adamah for earth, because God took the soil of the earth and created Adam out of it. And that was the first person. And then created Chava, also referred to as Eve, as Adam's helpmeet, or Ezer Kenegdo, or wife.
Some garden, but he was still lonely, so God gave him a wife. These two kinds of humans are made out of the same stuff, but also different so they can have a relationship. God gave them a lot of trees, but two big important ones. They're allowed to eat from this one, because if they do, they're going to live forever. But God told them not to eat from this one, because if they do, they die. Seems like a pretty obvious choice, right? Actually, said some snake who's actually the devil, God doesn't want you to eat from this tree because you're going to become like him, and he doesn't want you to get too powerful. Okay, said
Snakes
Eve.
lie.
Okay, said Adam. So they ate from the tree, and
of course,
that humanity had failed God's requirements for them. They lost access to the tree of life, which
didn't
means they're
do the
going to
right
end up
thing.
dying. Humanity had sided with Satan over God, losing all rights to the life that God gave them. So nobody could blame God.
I don't know that I put it that way.
Right then and there. But God didn't do that. God promised one day Satan would be destroyed by one of their kids. But Adam and Eve already...
It's used the word covenant there. We don't believe that that's a part of any particular covenant, that Satan would be destroyed by one of their kids. Satan isn't really doesn't really mean the same thing for Judaism and Christianity. There is a character in the Midrash and in the book of Job called Hasatan, or the opponent, who is an angel of God who also argues in God's heavenly court. And that's a main theme of the book of Job, or Eov in Hebrew. But this, this Satan is the eternal enemy of humanity, and something God is. It doesn't really work that way in Judaism. That's not how it's. Hasatan is not that important a character in Judaism.
Sin. So let's see if their kids can do any better. Cain is mad at his brother Abel because Abel's better at having faith in God. God tells Cain he needs to resist sin, and Cain kills his brother. Why'd he do that? Well, you see, the problem of Adam's sin was passed down to Cain because the problem affects all of humanity.
Okay, this is an important differentiation. Might come up a lot, I guess. We don't believe that there's such a thing as original sin. A sin of a human being belongs to that human being themselves. Once they're an adult, a responsible person. So that's why we have, you might have heard of a Jewish ceremony, a young man or young woman becoming bar bat mitzvah. And that means a son or daughter of the commandments. And what that means is that it is now their responsibility to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, that's on them. It's no longer on their parents, whose responsibility it was before them. So Cain's an adult. Cain does the wrong thing. His sin is on him. It doesn't come from Adam and Eve. Or Adam and Chava. That's just not how Judaism views it. I understand that's how Christianity views it, but that's not at all how we view it. The sin didn't come down that way. Cain chose to sin, or Cain chose to sin. Human beings have free choice. That's why God didn't destroy humanity when Adam and Chava sinned. God wants humanity to eventually choose to do the right thing. And that's why God will eventually institute a covenant. There's not one yet. There will be a couple of covenants. There will be the Noahide covenant from this Adam period, and especially with, obviously, after the flood and Noah. You'll get this covenant in which, basically do good things, don't eat live animals, establish courts of justice, don't adulter or murder, and everybody gets to go to Olam Haba, the world to come, or whatever our good version of the afterlife is. Jews don't think that much time about the afterlife, not nearly as much as Christianity does. So anyway, original sin, not a thing in Judaism. We're not all tainted by this action.
So as humans multiply, sin and evil multiply. Enough of this. God chooses the least evil guy, a guy named Noah. He's still a sinner, but he has faith in God, so he's a relatively decent guy compared to everyone else.
He's still a sinner, but he's a
God tells him to build
guy.
a boat for him and his family, and everyone laughs at them until God makes a huge flood that kills everyone except them. But once the flood passes, God makes the rainbow the sign of his covenant. Remember that promise that Satan's going to be destroyed? God adds to it, saying he's not going to...
Again, Satan will be destroyed, not part of a covenant as we understand it, but yes, this is certainly this rainbow, and God places his bow in the sky and says, I won't destroy the world again, and as long as you follow these rules that I described before, the Noahide rules, then everything will be okay. But what God will find is that people keep messing up, and so God will choose a nation to exemplify, to be the symbolic exemplar of the kind of morality and ethical behavior God expects of humanity and wants us to choose for ourselves. Now, even we, the Jews, will mess that up sometimes, but we'll see that it's an eternal covenant. Again, this differs from Christianity a bit, but it's important to draw these distinctions. Doesn't mean that in a pluralist society we can't all get along. We don't have to believe that every single thing that everybody else says is correct to respect that they believe differently than we do.
Destroy the world again until then, because now people are going to have some basic decency. God's not fixing the world yet, but he's making it a stable enough place so that he can do that in the future. So now people are not quite as evil as they were before. They're good enough that they can work together in society, but evil enough that they're going to use that to build a huge tower up to God out of their...
So, this is the thing. Judaism believes that humanity is imbued, all human beings are imbued with two forces inside them that are stronger or weaker depending on which one you feed. A Yetzer Hatov and a Yetzer Hara. That means a good impulse and an evil impulse. So the good impulse is what leads us to do charitable things that benefit others out of the goodness of our heart, to love, to have, meaningful relationships with people, to do the right thing. The Yetzer Hara is obviously the evil impulse, and it does push us to do things we shouldn't do. It makes us aggressive. It makes us arrogant, things like that. It also makes us ambitious, which sometimes can yield good things, because anyone who's ever created something had ambition, unless they did it by accident. So you do get some good things out of the Yetzer Hara, but mostly it's bad because it's an evil impulse. Just want to draw that distinction here. This is the natural part of humanity, and Judaism believes that if you feed the Yetzer Hatov and starve the Yetzer Hara, not that you'll ever get rid of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil impulse, but you will be able to conquer it, and you'll be able to primarily be a person of good impulse.
Pride.
But we're always
and evil
fighting
people
with it.
are dangerous when they're given too much power. So God makes the whole tower thing fail by dividing everyone's language. So maintenant le monde ne peut pas travailler ensemble. So now people are divided into different nations, and these nations each have their own gods. But wouldn't it be cool if there was one nation specifically devoted to the one true God?
There would be.
So God chose Abraham to be the father of his people, and God updated the covenant saying that God's going to make a nation that he's going to use to fix...
So this is the beginning. We wouldn't say we'd take this part where he's got covenant on there off the board, and I would say that, because the first part, I don't know so much about. The second part is more for Noah. The third part is part of the Abrahamic covenant, in that God chooses Abraham and promises him that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sands on the seashore, and in exchange, the nations of the world will bless themselves by Abraham's children. And they will also get a land promised to Abraham and his descendants. And so that's a different covenant than what's being displayed on the screen. I'm sure what he's displaying has a lot to do with Christian belief, but just for our purposes, the covenant with Abraham is different.
World. God promised Abraham he's going to have as many kids as the stars in the sky. And Abraham was like, how's that going to be possible? My wife is super old.
Shouldn't say that.
But Abraham still had faith in God's covenant. So does that mean he's the chosen one who's going to defeat Satan? Well, sadly, no, because Abraham still sinned
Nobody's
by
trying to
telling the
defeat
king that his
Satan.
wife was really his sister. But they do have kids. This one struggled with God, so he got the name Israel, which means struggled with God. And his children are going to become the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay, worth noting here, Abraham has other children. He obviously has Ishmael with Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. After Sarah dies, he marries another woman named Keturah and has a child with her. And these all become different peoples, whether the Arab peoples or, they all become different peoples. And Isaac's children become the Jewish people, specifically through Jacob or Israel. Israel does mean struggle with God, and there are 12 tribes down there. Obviously, Joseph, being so great and important, ends up getting a double portion from Jacob. And so his kids, Ephraim and Manasseh, get land also in the land of Israel, and Levi doesn't get any land. He gets sanctuary cities because his people become the priests, the priestly class.
Struggled with God because sin is still a problem. If you think your family is bad, this one was so dysfunctional they sent Joseph to slavery in Egypt.
Yep.
But while he was there, God
do
gave him
that.
the ability to protect Egypt from starving to death. So now Egypt loves Joseph, and in a great act of forgiveness...
It's worth noting that the Pharaoh kind of hides that Joseph is a Hebrew, an Israelite, that he's because Egyptians... These Egyptians are the first anti-Semites, right? They don't like Hebrews. They don't want anything to do with them. But he dresses Joseph up like a Egyptian and gives him an Egyptian name and an Egyptian wife, and says, okay, Egyptian people, this dream interpreter is actually going to help save us. So it's just worth noting that it's not like it's all sunshine and rainbows. There's some intrigue involved.
Joseph invited the rest of his family back to live with him in Egypt.
Yep, they live
so
in
God was
Goshen.
glorified through his people by turning a bad thing into a good thing. At first, Egypt likes the Israelites, but when they multiply a lot, Egypt stops liking them and enslaves them instead.
Yep.
Moses is one of the Israelites, and when he sees an Egyptian beating another Israelite, he kills the Egyptian. Come on, Israelites, let's rise up.
He not so much on the rising up right
You're
away.
gonna get us in trouble.
Yeah.
So Moses has to flee Egypt, and he moves to the middle of nowhere, joins a sheep farm, gets married, and lives happily ever after. But one day God appears to Moses in a burning bush, saying it's finally time for the Israelites to have that land.
A burning
God
bush
promised them.
that isn't
So
consumed.
God tells Moses to tell the leader of Egypt to let his people go.
That's a miracle.
So Moses goes back to Egypt and tells Pharaoh, "Let my people go." No. But God gives Moses the ability to cause plagues in Egypt. Let my people go, or the river turns to blood.
Oh,
No.
yeah,
Or you
no.
get frogs everywhere. No. Gnats. No. Flies. No. Dead livestock. No. Boils. No. Hail. No. Locusts. No. Darkness. No. Let us go, or your firstborn sons will die.
Oh, no.
But then the firstborn
Doesn't
sons
agree.
die, so the Pharaoh's like, okay, fine, you can leave. So the Israelites set out for the Promised Land, but when they're about halfway there, Egypt changes its mind and sends the army after them to bring them back. They corner them by the Red Sea. "We've got you surrounded." "Oh yeah?" says Moses. "Watch this." So the waters of the Red Sea part, the Israelites escape, but when the Egyptians try to follow them, they unpart and they all die. On their journey, they take a rest stop at Mount Sinai so God can
Yeah, so that God can reveal the Torah. Revelation at Mount Sinai is one of the few things that all Jews agree on.
give them the law for when they live in the Promised Land. Moses will go up to the top of the mountain to receive the law, so he says, "Don't worship any false gods while I'm gone."
Uh-oh.
Bro, I'm bored. Let's worship some false gods. So they make a golden calf and worship it. Meanwhile, on the top of the
It's worth noting. He's bringing up some things, and it's a little funny, and it's true. It's the Israelites will constantly mess up. I can think there is no other people struggling to improve themselves as a people who is willing to put in our holiest book all the examples of the times we messed up. And we put them all in there. And it just teaches us, it gives us examples what not to live by. And the Torah also gives us examples to live by. So all of this is meant to, again, help us become this moral, ethical people who can exemplify the type of life God wants people on earth to live, so that all the other nations of the world, we're supposed to be a light unto the nations. And so we will show them the way monotheism allows us to live good lives of happiness and morality without all the troubles of the very ancient world.
The presence of God descends upon the mountain, and Moses receives the law on stone tablets, including the 10 Commandments. But when Moses goes back down and sees the Israelites worshiping a false god, he gets so mad he smashes the stone tablets. So he goes back up the mountain and gets new stone tablets. And God adds to the covenant, saying he's going to give the people the law and the land if they're faithful to the covenant. So let's see how faithful they're going to be. The people are approaching the Promised Land, but the evil Canaanites already live there. They have strong fortresses and big, scary soldiers, and
Torah
the
says they're
Israelites are going to
bad.
have to fight them to take over the land. Come on, guys, be brave. God's going to be...
Be brave. The words in Hebrew, they get said a few times, but basically, and God tells Joseph, and not Joseph, sorry. God tells Joshua, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and of good courage. That the people should know that God is with them.
You? No, we're too afraid. So the Israelites turn away, they don't invade the land, which means they did not have faith in God's covenant. So their punishment is they have to wander around the Sinai desert for 40 years. But what about Moses? He didn't...
Well, we believe actually that the reason they had to do that was not just because they weren't ready to immediately invade, but because in fact there was a mindset in those who left Egypt, the mindset essentially of slavery. That these people born in slavery were not truly equipped to be a free people yet. So God said, okay, we're gonna hold out 40 years. We'll spend time together, you'll learn, and you'll wander this desert. And during this time, those who left Egypt will all have passed away, and a new generation capable of believing and carrying out what I desire will arise. And that's what happens.
Wrong, so maybe he's the chosen one who's going to defeat Satan? Well, no, Moses still sinned by doing a miracle the wrong way, so his punishment is he's going to die before he gets to enter the Promised Land.
Yep.
But then the next generation of Israelites, led by Joshua, does enter the land, uses trumpets to smash the city of Jericho, and
do what
drives out
God
the rest of
asks.
the Canaanites. Cool, now we finally have our land, but who's going to rule us? So God appoints judges to rule over the people and defend them from the enemy nations. Because during this time, there's a pattern that goes something like this. There's peace in the land, but then people get lazy and forget about God, so God lets their enemies conquer them, but then people turn back to God, so God strengthens them to reconquer their land, and there's peace in the land again. This pattern repeats many, many times with many, many different judges, and people are starting to get sick of it. Bro, why can't we just have a king? Trust me, you don't want a king, says Samuel. Come on, everyone else has a king. Okay, fine.
Fine, he's going to be bad. Yeah, essentially the people go to the prophet Samuel and they say, we want a king like all the other nations around us. The book of Judges ends by essentially saying, at that time there was no king in Israel and every person did what was pleasing to their own eye. And that is exactly not what God wants. That's not us the Jews exemplifying a certain ethical, moral lifestyle. It's just not. So the people go and they say, we want a king. And Samuel goes, Shmuel, who I'm named for, says, what do you mean? God is your king. And they say, well, all the other nations have kings to lead their military and do various things. And this, remember, the book of Deuteronomy says that there will be a king, but he'll be a special kind of king that focuses on doing what's right and doesn't have too many wives or horses or women or gold. Doesn't aggrandize himself, but instead makes God great. And so Samuel's like, okay, we'll start this process, even though when speaking to God, Samuel's like, okay, this doesn't look good. And God's like, it won't be that good. But, this is a necessary step for the development of the fulfillment of the plan.
Samuel, but the king's going to be oppressive. So Samuel anoints Saul as king, and sure enough, Saul is an oppressive ruler. You know who would be a better ruler? This young kid, David. He's just a shepherd and a string player, so no one takes him seriously. But one day, a huge, scary caveman warrior, Goliath, shows up to fight the Israelites. Okay, guys, who wants to fight Goliath? I'll do it, says David. So David takes out his slingshot, hits Goliath in the head with a rock and kills
like
him.
A bag.
So now David's a hero and everyone loves David, and Saul is getting pretty jealous of David. Especially because all the girls are chanting, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands.
Good reference.
So Saul wants to kill David. So David flees, and Saul pursues him.
David does a lot of fleeing.
David gets a golden opportunity to kill Saul while he's using the bathroom, but he doesn't, so Saul forgives David. But one day Saul dies to avoid being captured, so David becomes the next king. This is awesome. It starts out really well, and David gains a lot of victories for his kingdom. Maybe he's the chosen one that's going to defeat Satan. Except no,
that's not really the point.
David sins because he likes this one woman, so he has her husband.
Right. It probably says down there Bathsheba and Uriah, who are, Uriah's the husband, Bathsheba's the wife. He sees Bathsheba bathing naked on a roof, and he says, wow, she's really pretty, and his friend Uriah is her husband. So after he sleeps with Bathsheba and she becomes pregnant, he does this terrible thing. Again, the Chronicles books later in the writings tell a more sanitized version of of King David's story, but essentially he says, Uriah, maybe come back and lay with your wife, and we'll just, in his head he's like, oh, we'll pretend that this kid is yours. And Uriah's like, no, I couldn't possibly leave my soldiers and enjoy a night with my wife. And so David goes, okay, I tried. And then he goes to Yoav, his top general, and says, when the next battle starts, put him up front and have everybody take a step back. Not the best move. As this guy says, he's right. That's a sin. He does the wrong thing. And because of that, David does not get to build the temple. His son Solomon will build the temple, or Shlomo will build the temple.
In battle so he can steal her. So God makes everything go downhill for David after that. But God's
his son chases him out
that
at
one
one
of
point,
David's descendants
but he comes
will be
back.
the king that he couldn't be. Have a kingdom that covers the entire world and lasts forever. So let's add this to the covenant.
An eternal kingdom. Well, there is the idea that one day, after the Israelites and the Jews have done what is displeasing to God and have been dispersed, that there will be a Mashiach, as some kings are. King Cyrus, Koresh of Persia, is one of those. That will essentially be a king, an earthly king, who will restore the Jews to sovereignty in the land of Israel, and they won't get kicked out again. So I guess you could say an eternal kingdom. I don't know about eternal, but certainly maybe everlasting I'd be more theologically comfortable with. I don't know.
Maybe David's son Solomon can do it. He's off to a great start, asking God for wisdom and then writing down a bunch of wise sayings, which impresses all the kings and queens.
He also
of the
writes
earth who wanna
Kohelet
learn
or
from Solomon.
Ecclesiastes.
And furthermore, Solomon builds a huge, beautiful temple to glorify God. So right now, his
Yay.
kingdom is a shining beacon of light to the world, and God is glorified through his people. So maybe Solomon's that future king who's going to rule the entire world. Except no, Solomon sins by having a bunch of wives and
I like that it says cross through 18, because that is the maximum number of wives that a king is, the Talmud says a king is allowed to have is 18. It's more than one, which I'm not that happy with. And Jews, thanks to the teachings of Rabbeinu Gershom of Ashkenazi Jewry in the around 1,000 years ago, we no longer practice, polygyny, plural marriage, however you want to put it. But at the time, the king was allowed to do that, but up to 18, because again, Deuteronomy says you shouldn't amass too many wives. And Solomon had like 1,000 wives and a bunch of concubines and all that. And so he also lets them put their idols and stuff, have shrines to them and stuff, because some of them aren't Israelites, they're foreign princesses to secure alliances and whatnot. The downside of having an earthly king. So anyway, it doesn't work out that way.
Some of whom are not Israelite, so Solomon ends up worshiping foreign gods, and then everything goes
worshiping,
downhill for
having around, yeah.
And after this, things kind of went downhill for the kingdom as a whole because people kept sinning more.
Yes, and because historically, because this is a real kingdom, in addition to a theological kingdom, because after the Bronze Age collapse, the kingdoms of Egypt and Assyria were really, really weak, and the old Babylonian Empire were really weak, and so Israel was able to form, and then as those empires regain their strength, Israel comes under pressure. And Judah.
Split into Israel and Judah, and both kingdoms got evil kings who worshipped pagan gods. But it's not like everything was bad during this time period, because a lot of
some of the kings weren't bad, like Josiah and Hezekiah. Some of them were good kings, especially down in Judah, because the kingdom of Judah is the line of David, and the line of David is a good line according to the Tanakh. At this point, we're in the books of the Nevi'im, not the Torah, but still holy books. Yes, Elijah and Elijah and or Eliyahu and Isaiah or Yeshayahu are prophets of Israel for sure.
People to turn back to God. And even when the temple was literally being used as a place of demon worship, God never told the prophets to abandon the temple, but instead to restore, revive, and retake the temple. And there were actually some good kings who listened to them and reformed the temple, encouraging people to remember God's covenant. But
again, anyway.
And with all this, eventually Israel was eaten by Assyria, Judah was eaten by Babylon, they smashed the temple, and the Israelites were carried off to exile.
Yep.
Eventually, Persia got a nice
Cyrus
king
the
who
Great.
let the Israelites go back to their land, and even gave them money to rebuild their temple.
Yes, he did.
Maybe now it's finally time for that eternal kingdom. So they're rebuilding the temple. Yo, this is gonna be so great!
Are these guys supposed to be Ezra and
Nehemiah? It's just not like
Nehemiah?
it was before. They were kind of disappointed that it wasn't time for the eternal kingdom yet, but they still had faith in God's covenant that was going to happen eventually. And the prophet started focusing a lot on this future king, giving him names like Messiah or the Son of Man.
Again, Messiah doesn't mean son of man. At least, let's put it this way. Mashiach, the word that he put up there, the word that they're using in Hebrew, merely means anointed one. Anointed in the way that kings are anointed. Because it's an earthly king. It's a king. It's a descendant of King David. And so the Messiah, the Mashiach, is a king. Just a guy, a person. That's what Jews believe. Christians are free to believe whatever they want, but they can't tell us what to believe.
Daniel said that this kingdom would outlast all the other kingdoms.
Yep, just like we said, it'll last forever.
Be born in Beth.
Micah says that the king will be born in Bethlehem. Micah means that the king will be born of Judah. And again, that makes some sense. It doesn't have to be that specific.
Isaiah said this king would suffer for the sins of his people.
No, Isaiah. This is understood very differently between Christians and Jews. Jews understand this idea of the suffering servant actually being Yaakov, meaning Yisrael, because remember Jacob got the name Israel. what Isaiah is referring to is that the people of Israel will suffer for the sins of the world, and one day the people of the world will see how the Jews have suffered for them and will, love and accept the Jews at that point. That's what we believe it means. We don't believe that it means that there will be that the king shall suffer in this way, and we don't believe that.
And Zechariah said God will send God to live with us. Does that mean this king is going to be God?
It doesn't.
Everyone's
to Jews.
Wondering about this Messiah.
Because again,
when is he going to?
It doesn't mean that to Jews, because God will send one who can understand God in his heart to live with us, to be the Mashiach, to be the king. But that doesn't mean that that person will literally be God, because to Judaism, that's heresy. That's not acceptable, because the unity of God is one of those very few things that all Jews agree on. God is exactly one. There is God. God is God. No, God doesn't break into parts. That's just not how Jews see it.
And who is he going to be? An Israelite will.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and stop there, because they're going to go into the story of Jesus and Christian belief. I want to thank you for joining us. I found this video, I think, first of all, he did a really good job of imitating the style of History of the World. And I hope he gets a lot of views on this. And I'm sure Christians will see this as a wholly accurate and entertaining view of what they would view as the Hebrew Bible. For us, it's just the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, the main instruction, the 5 books of Moses, the books of the prophets, and the writings. And for me, I thought it was fun. I think also there were a lot of things I had to explain that, are different between Jews and Christians. But as I said partway through the video, in a pluralist society, in an enlightened society, we should be able to accept more than one idea as being acceptable. So what I mean by that, of course, is that if Christians want to believe all of it exactly the way he said it, that's fine. If Jews want to believe it exactly the way I said it, although Jews rarely agree, so they probably won't do it exactly the way I said it, that's fine too. And we can still all get along even though we see it differently, because they don't have to come pray at a synagogue and Jews don't pray at a church. We do these things separately. So long as we can see that what we're looking for is to live a life in which we aren't dominated by sin, a world in which we are exemplifying this ethical monotheism, a moral lifestyle for everyone around the world, then really we're accomplishing a similar mission. And in that way, I think we can all be brothers and sisters together. And I think nothing would make Abraham happier, maybe. And I hope it would make God happy as well. So with that, thank you for joining me for this video. I hope to see you next time, and be well.